So this video is going to show how to do the repairs on an existing Delta Fusion Focus 250 or Pearl fireplace using a repair kit that we're providing. Some of the parts here will be needed for a Focus 250 or a Pearl, and some will be needed for a Delta Fusion. The parts that will be needed for a Pearl or a 250 include this additional channel and a gasket replacement kit, whereas the kit for the Delta Fusion will come with a new handle, some replacement washers and pieces, and a new drill bit. If the existing handle is already installed, you can simply remove it by taking off this little nut with the roller that comes with it. And then there's a nut on the back side that also gets removed. The handle is actually threaded into the door itself, so you'll just spin it out to actually remove the existing handle. We're going to remove these threads as part of the process to retrofit the handle to a new design. Obviously the handle itself is threaded, and then there's threads that pass through this nut. It's possible that on the door that you have, this nut is not there, and you'll just be drilling through the actual metal of the door itself. Some units have the nut. The ones that do require a couple of extra steps. The next step applies only to the Focus 250 or the Pearl fireplace. If you have a Focus 250 or a Pearl, it's necessary to change this metal gasket here. So we're going to start by actually grabbing hold of the gasket that's already there and peeling it up. You can see the silicone is holding it in place. So we're just going to remove the bit of gasket that is actually along this channel. And now we're going to remove the actual channel. This is a 11/32 hex head. We're going to just undo these nuts. You could also just use a pair of pliers. And there we go. Remove the existing channel and we'll replace it with the new channel. You'll see that there's a notch that's missing here, so you just simply lay it onto the existing bolts that are there, reinstall the nuts that came with it. Being very careful with the nuts because the actual bolt part that's in the door itself is made of copper and can be damaged if you cross-thread it. So just make sure that you're not cross-threading it as you go down, and they don't really have to be any more than a little bit more than hand tight, using a pair of pliers or a vice grip to just get you there if you absolutely need to. But once it's just snug like that, you should be good to go. And then we'll wait for a second before we apply the silicone to this. If when you're installing the nuts back onto the channel, for example, if you strip one of the bolts, these are welded bolts to the back of the door, we provided two little push washers that you can just push on. You won't have to thread on the nut like this, so when you go to remove them you'll pry them off. But these little push nuts here, if for some reason this bolt becomes stripped, they can simply be pushed on to salvage the back of the bolt there. The next step is to actually remove the threads that are passing through the door. So some of the units have a nut welded on the back here, some units do not. The units that don't have the nut will be very easy to drill through because you're only drilling through the threads that are inside the door itself. The nut is a very hard metal, so if you do have a nut on the back of the door, there's a couple things you have to do. First, you have to lubricate the bit. We recommend using WD-40 because it won't strip the paint, and it's very easy to clean up. Use a brand new bit, which we've provided in the kit along with all the parts, and go very slowly. On your drill you'll have high speed and low speed, and you don't want to be spinning much more than about halfway on low speed. So what you'll want to do when you're drilling the bit out is lubricate your bit to start. Position yourself from the back vertically over the opening. And very slowly, if you get caught, start, come back. You want to let the bit do the work. You don't want to put too much pressure on it. If you find that you're smoking a little bit, just apply a bit more WD-40. Next, we're going to reinstall the gasket. You can see that there's some silicone still in the gasket itself, but the channel is very clean, which is what we want. If for some reason the gasket was damaged when you were pulling it out, we do supply a complete gasket replacement kit. The kit comes with silicone that you'll need to reinstall the gasket that we have here. So basically you just take the lid off. I've already cut the opening there. We're going to do a pretty thick bead. We're going to do about a 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch thick bead all the way along the channel here. Right over the nuts that we have, and right up and around the corners as well. Then we're just going to take our gasket, push it right into the corners and give it a good shove. Right down back into the channel. So this is the new handle that came with it. It also came with some brass washers. There's thin ones and thick ones. On the back side of the handle, we're going to use one thin one. We're doing that because it's a new door with a relatively puffed up thick gasket. If this was an older door with a used gasket, I would probably use this thicker brass washer. That would allow the door to seal a little bit tighter and make sure we got a good seal. So I'm going to push that on like so, on the back side behind the nut. If there is no nut, it would be right on the back of the door. We're putting this thicker washer here, and then behind that we're going to put a steel washer. The steel washer has a rounded side, so the rounded side is going to go up against the brass, and you'll notice this is why we actually changed the channel for the gasket, because these washers would otherwise be hitting the flat side of it. Next, we're going to install the nut. It comes with a lock nut. You can see it's marked as a lock nut. It's relatively thin, and we're just going to want to make sure that we get that properly lined up. Get it started on the unit, and you're going to need a wrench in order to install this. This is just a 9/16 wrench, so it's going to have a bit of resistance, but not too much as you put on the washer, put on the nut itself. You don't want to over tighten it. We'll get it to the point where it's just holding the handle in place. You can see the handle is still a little bit loose. So once the door handle has been tightened up to the point where it's no longer flopping around, it is nice and solid but still rotates easily. That's the right tightness for the nut on the back side. It may be a good idea to mount the door back onto the fireplace at this point, so you can check to make sure that everything is being secured properly. The last step is to install the roller, which gets inserted into the nut there, and now you have your finished door handle. If we look at it from the side, we'll see the new orientation. So we have the cone, which is new, one bronze washer on the front side of the door, a bronze washer on the back side, followed by a steel washer, the lock nut, and then the rolling mechanism. But that's the new door handle that moves nice and smoothly and won't lock up like the old one.